Spacefront True Believers, welcome back to the Cave of Dorkness. This is episode 8, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So we recently lost Stan Lee. He was 95 years old and he passed away last week. Obviously his death struck the internet hard, and I've seen all manner of tribute art and videos and articles. I've written a couple myself, and it's been really nice to see the outpouring of love for the co-creator of the Marvel Universe. And I say the co-creator of the Marvel Universe because he couldn't have done it all without Jack the King Kirby here. The way the Marvel method worked back in the 60s was that Stan Lee would have an idea or an outline, he'd hand it off to somebody like Jack, and Jack would go on and do the plotting. You know, he'd do the whole comic. I mean, he would do panel by panel by panel, create the entire art, basically create the story, and then hand the art back to Stan Lee, and sometimes it would look completely different than what Lee had requested, and Lee went in and filled in the thought balloons and the word balloons and the captions, and he gave Marvel its voice. But because of the Marvel method, you really can't give sole credit to Stan Lee. You have to talk about guys like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and John Romita and Sal Buscema and all those guys. It's a magic elixir. I saw somebody say that online. It's this combination of these two talents that produced the Amazing Spider-Man and the Uncanny X-Men and the Incredible Hulk, and of course the Fantastic Four. 1963, Stan Lee had already been working with Marvel, or what would eventually become Marvel, for 20 years. He was getting fed up of it. On the side, he was doing copywriting and newspaper articles, and he was burnt out, and he was ready to go. And his publisher, Martin Goodwin, just wanted Biff Bam Pow action adventure comics for kids. And Stan was fed up with that stuff, so he was on the verge of handing in his resignation when his wife, Joan, said, "Hey, if you're going to go, why don't you go writing your last book the way you would want to write it? Bring your characterization to the story. Bring your melodrama. Show that it's not all about punching and kicking and fighting, but the everyday drama is just as compelling as any action scene." And that first issue was the Fantastic Four that he made with Jack Kirby. And, it's about these astronauts who go up to space, they get buffeted by cosmic rays, and they come back to Earth, and they are changed. They are mutated into these superheroes. Reed Richards is Mr. Fantastic with his body can stretch, and Sue Storm is the Invisible Girl, and it's all in the name. You know what that's like. The Human Torch. It's the Human Torch. And then Ben Grimm, the Thing, this man monster, this self-loathing beast. And while it's awesome to watch him yell out, "It's clobbering time," it's just as interesting to see him deal with the doubt he has looking in the mirror. And it just completely revolutionized comics and storytelling, and Marvel took off. And I love the fact that Stan Lee was 39 when he co-created the Fantastic Four. I'm 39. There's hope for me yet. I can still leave my stamp on the earth. Whew, thank goodness. So what do we have here? 2 mini busts sculpted by Randy Bowen. We talked about Randy Bowen during the Death Dealer episode. And he was a sculptor that I obsessed over back in the late 90s, early aughts. And these two he made in tribute to the creators of the Marvel Universe, Jack the King Kirby, Stan the Man Lee. He did them in 2003. They're pretty good likenesses, especially the Jack Kirby. I love the Jack Kirby. He's got his stogie in there. He just looks gruff and no nonsense, and a man of action. And, Stan Lee, it's pretty good. He's got the glasses. He's got the smiling Stan expression on his face. Excelsior. What other industry can afford to create works of art around their creators. I guess there's been some George Lucas action figures here and there, but few fandoms can support making busts off of the men behind the scenes. And I really cherish these. And now that they're all have left us, I'd love to get a Steve Ditko, Randy Bowen, get back to sculpting. I need a Steve Ditko bust. But these guys sit up on my shelf and stare down at me while I'm writing, and that gives me a lot of comfort. You know, Marvel Comics, obviously he has meant a lot to me in my life, and I'm sure it's meant a lot to you guys as well. The first comic book I ever encountered was Uncanny X-Men number 275. My friend William in 5th grade let me borrow his copy. I read it. I said, well, who are these mutants and where can I get more of this stuff? And I had just moved to Virginia, and luckily enough, we were down the street from Joe Gumbinger's comic book shop, and my dad took me there. This was like 1991, maybe... No. It would have been the summer of 1990. The comics I first purchased were an adaptation of RoboCop 2 and G.I. Joe number 103. So as a newbie to comic books, I went in with the licensed properties first to test out the medium. But eventually I got the X-Men comics that William was really into, and then Amazing Spider-Man. When I started buying Amazing Spider-Man, Eric Larson was doing the art. And I think that's the other cool thing about comic books is, you know, these guys create these characters in the 60s, and, you know, Stan worked on them for a long time, well into the mid-70s, and then he went off to be the, you know, the face of Marvel, the editor-in-chief, the publisher, and, you know, the cameo master that we know him to be today. Whereas, like, Jack Kirby, you know, he was trapped in that work-for-hire business, and he pushed against it and was very frustrated by the lack of royalties and attention that he got for his works. And, you know, his name is now in the credits of all these movies, but nobody knows the face of Jack Kirby the way they know Stan Lee. And the reason that is because Stan Lee stuck around, and he outlived these guys. You know, Steve Ditko went into, you know, seclusion, and Jack Kirby passed away quite a while ago, and Stan stuck around and worked in a deal where he got paid like $1 million a year just to be Stan Lee and the voice of Marvel. It's a really cushy gig, and because of that, we all know who Stan is, and less of us know who Jack Kirby is and Steve Ditko. That's a bummer. But what are you going to do? But like I was saying, what's cool about Marvel Comics is these guys create it. Stan works on it till the 70s, and then he passes these characters off to other writers, you know, Roy Thomas and Gary Friedrich and Chris Claremont, and artists like Eric Larson and Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld, those Image guys who then got fed up and didn't want to become the next Jack Kirby, so they broke away from Marvel and started Image Comics. And, you know, people know who those guys are in a way that they don't know who Jack Kirby is, because they embraced the business side of things, and they knew that you had to own the rights to your characters for you to get yourself out there, for you to be a known quantity the way Stan's a known quantity. But I love these two little busts. They fill me with inspiration. They're prized and precious characters in my dork cave here. So there you go. That's it for today. Buy some comics. Read their books. Check out Marvel's Epic Collection line. You can read the first issues of, you know, X-Men, Incredible Hulk, Fantastic Four for a relatively cheap price. I think the list price is like $29.99. No, it's $39.99. But if you go to places like Amazon or eBay, you can get them for a lot cheaper than that. And I would recommend to, you know, go see the origins of these characters and go see the origins of this type of storytelling. It's very different than what comics are today. And then pick up the contemporary comics. See what Fantastic Four is doing right now. Dan Slott and Sarah Pichelli are killing it with Fantastic Four right now. Nearly 80 years after their creation, the characters are still going strong. They're still finding new ways to tell stories with these characters, and then still embracing that Marvel melodramatic concept of character, emotion, just as important as fisticuffs. So there you have it. Follow my other dorks, the Turtle Dork, Brian Young, at the Turtle Dork on Twitter, and he's something else on Instagram. I can never remember. Follow the Indie Dork, William Das, at WB Das on Twitter and Instagram. Follow my wife, Lisa Gullickson, at Sidewalk Siren on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. Follow Darren Smith at the Disco Dork on all social medias. And I, of course, am Brad Gullickson at MouthDork on all social medias. So until next time, guys, Excelsior! Bye.